childhood and early life. Mohamed Atta was born on September 1, 1968, in the Egyptian city of Kafr el-Sheikh, nestled in the agriculturally rich Nile Delta. Though his family belonged to the middle class, they carried themselves with the pride and discipline characteristic of Egypt's educated elite. His father, Mohammed el-Amir Awad el-Sayed Atta, was a strict and conservative lawyer, while his mother, Bathana Mohammed Mustafa Sharaki, was a homemaker devoted to traditional Islamic values. Atta's upbringing was defined by emotional reserve, high expectations, and an atmosphere of ideological discipline. From early on, he was known for his orderliness and fastidiousness. Unlike other children in his neighborhood who played in the streets, Mohammed was more comfortable indoors, organizing his schoolbooks and sketching cityscapes. His perfectionism extended into his demeanor. He disliked loud noises, messiness, and disruptions to his routines. He was often described as emotionless, withdrawn, and overly serious for a child. His father's influence was paramount. Mohammed el-Amir was a stern, rigid man with deeply conservative values. He was intellectually bright but emotionally detached, viewing parenting more as a responsibility than a bond. He instilled discipline, demanded academic excellence, and had little tolerance for deviation from tradition. In conversations, his word was law. He held a powerful disdain for what he saw as the moral decline of Western societies and frequently lectured his children on the dangers of liberalism, secularism, and Zionism. The father's ideological rigidity formed the psychological walls within which Mohammed matured. Atta's mother, Bathana, was quiet, soft-spoken, and deeply religious. While more emotionally accessible than her husband, she remained submissive to his authority. She doted on Mohammed as her only son but rarely overstepped the bounds set by her husband. Bathana encouraged spiritual piety and taught Mohammed the basics of Quranic studies at home. Her influence was subtle, nurturing his attachment to faith and routine. However, her love, though present, was restrained by a cultural code that discouraged overt displays of affection. The home environment was thus one of solemnity and seriousness. Laughter was rare. Conversations were formal. Mohammed grew up surrounded by books, prayer rugs, and the firm understanding that discipline, obedience, and modesty were the cornerstones of family and life. Even games or entertainment were filtered through a lens of what was deemed morally acceptable. As a student in local public schools, Mohammed excelled. Teachers noted his diligence and his ability to concentrate for long periods. While he showed strong aptitude in subjects like math and science, his imagination and passion were captured by architecture. He began to view cities as living organisms, spaces capable of enforcing values, encouraging certain behaviors, and reflecting cultural and religious identity. He believed cities could serve as physical embodiments of morality and order. The family's move to Cairo in the early 1980s exposed him to the sprawling capital's chaos, poverty, and materialism. Cairo's modernization only seemed to deepen his sense of spiritual and societal dislocation. He found in Cairo both inspiration for his architectural mind and a deeper grievance, the apparent erosion of traditional Islamic values amidst unchecked modernization. This contradiction between progress and piety began to torment him. Atta entered Cairo University to study architecture, a path encouraged by his father. While he excelled academically, his social isolation intensified. Fellow students described him as cold and reclusive. He rarely spoke unless necessary and seldom engaged in camaraderie or student activities. He avoided social outings, and even when he did attend gatherings, he often sat silently, observing but never participating. During these university years, Atta began immersing himself in Islamic literature and philosophy. He started to attend religious study circles, not the radical kind, but those that emphasized Islamic orthodoxy and morality. The cultural tension he felt living in a secularized, westernizing Egypt resonated deeply with the sermons and writings that lamented the fall of Islamic greatness. He saw Egypt's moral decay as symptomatic of a wider civilizational crisis. His writings from this period reveal a mind consumed with purity, order, and restoration. He often reflected on how architecture could serve religious ends, how mosque-centered communities, minimalist urban designs, and gender-segregated public spaces could help foster Islamic piety. For him, buildings were not just shelters, they were instruments of ideological clarity. By the late 1980s, his religious behavior grew increasingly rigid. He refused to shake hands with women, avoided eye contact with the opposite sex, and fasted and prayed with intense devotion. He meticulously planned his days, and any deviation from his schedule caused agitation. Friends, though he had few, noticed a growing inflexibility in his thinking. He began to exhibit traits often associated with obsessive-compulsive behavior and ideological dogmatism. Atta's worldview was also shaped by political developments. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the perceived submission of Arab governments to Western powers, and the Gulf War all fed into a narrative of Muslim humiliation and oppression. Although he had not yet embraced radicalism, these events planted the seeds of a belief system rooted in grievance, alienation, and a longing for retribution. Despite his increasingly narrow ideology, his parents were proud of his accomplishments. They saw him as a disciplined, focused young man on the path to a successful career. His father, in particular, believed Mohammed was destined to become a respected professional, perhaps a professor or a government planner. They had no idea that his intellectual curiosity had taken a darker turn. After graduating in 1990, Atta took a job at an urban planning firm in Cairo. Initially excited, he quickly grew disillusioned by the corporate environment, which prioritized profit over people. The focus on commercial developments and tourism-driven designs disgusted him. He saw this as further evidence of how capitalism and Western influence were eroding Islamic culture and identity. He became more withdrawn and started contemplating how urban planning could be used not to serve economic growth, but to engineer a moral and religious society. It was at this juncture that he decided to seek further education abroad, not to embrace the West, but to study it, understand it, and ultimately critique and reject it. He saw the West not as a model to emulate, but as an opponent to intellectually and spiritually dissect. When he applied to the Technical University of Hamburg-Harburg in Germany for a graduate program in urban planning, his intentions were already colored by his ideological discontent. Before departing Egypt in 1992, Atta performed the pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj. For most Muslims, the Hajj is a spiritual milestone, a once-in-a-lifetime obligation that marks a moment of reflection and renewal. For Atta, it was more than a rite of passage, it was a symbolic cleansing before entering a phase of deeper ideological commitment. He saw it as a transition, a leaving behind of spiritual confusion, and the beginning of a new life guided by Islamic clarity and purpose. His parents saw him off with high hopes, believing he would become an international expert in urban development. But Mohamed Atta stepped on that plane not as a young man full of dreams, but as one filled with resentment, intellectual rigidity, and a growing disdain for the Western world he was about to enter. His childhood, shaped by emotional distance, authoritarian upbringing, cultural alienation, and spiritual yearning, had set him on a path not of exploration, but confrontation. Moving to Germany, a shift in ideology. In the early 1990s, Mohamed Atta's life took a dramatic turn when he moved to Germany to pursue higher education. Having completed his architectural studies at Cairo University, he received a scholarship to study urban planning in Hamburg. This shift in geography marked the beginning of a profound ideological transformation. Germany, at the time, was becoming a hotspot for Islamic intellectual and political discourse among Arab immigrants, particularly those disillusioned by the state of affairs in their home countries. Atta initially lived a relatively quiet life. He was granted a visa and enrolled at the Hamburg University of Technology, where he worked on a thesis about the traditional architecture of Aleppo in Syria. This academic focus revealed his early interest in how Western modernization clashed with traditional Islamic aesthetics. However, beneath the academic pursuits, Atta began to withdraw socially and emotionally. He felt alienated not only by the Western culture surrounding him, but also by the increasing secularism and materialism he perceived within it. These feelings of displacement became fertile ground for radicalization. Atta's discomfort with Western culture extended to his daily routine. He rarely engaged in recreational activities and avoided forming friendships outside his cultural circle. Even within the university, he kept interactions minimal, often presenting himself as aloof and highly private. Professors described him as intelligent but rigid in thinking, with a tendency toward absolutism. He had a growing disdain for Western liberal values and viewed multiculturalism as a threat to Islamic identity. In Hamburg, he gravitated toward a mosque known for hosting conservative and, eventually, radical clerics. It was there, during study sessions and informal gatherings, that he met like-minded individuals such as Marwan al-Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, and Ramzi bin al-Shib. This core group of men, known later as the Hamburg Cell, became a breeding ground for jihadist ideology. Initially, their discussions were academic and philosophical, centered on politics in the Middle East, U.S. foreign policy, and the decline of Islamic civilization. But over time, these discussions grew darker, more militant, and increasingly conspiratorial. What started as debates about Muslim identity slowly turned into justifications for violence. The group studied the writings of Sayyid Qutb and other Islamist thinkers who advocated for the re-establishment of a pure Islamic state, even through armed struggle. Atta, always methodical, began compiling his own notes, treating ideology as an engineering project, systematic, logical, and goal-oriented. By the mid-1990s, Atta had become deeply entrenched in the belief that the West, particularly the United States, was at war with Islam. He saw every global conflict, from Palestine to Chechnya to Iraq, as proof of a grand design to undermine Muslims. This belief wasn't formed overnight. It came from hours of isolation, late-night discussions, online forums, and radical preachers who framed jihad as the only rational response to what they called a global crusade. During this period, Atta's personality changed markedly. Friends and professors recalled that he became distant, stern, and rigid. He would chastise fellow Muslims for drinking alcohol or mingling with non-Muslims. His tone became authoritarian, and he began to see himself as a moral enforcer of Islamic values. He stopped celebrating birthdays, refused to shake hands with women, and became deeply suspicious of any kind of emotional vulnerability. His journal, discovered later, was filled with passages reflecting deep resentment, a growing hatred for the West, and a longing for martyrdom. Atta and his group began attending more closed-door meetings where Salafi jihadist ideology was openly discussed. These meetings were well-organized and often included videos of conflicts involving Muslims around the world. They were shown to reinforce a narrative of victimhood and global oppression. Atta, by now, was no longer just a listener, he was a contributor. He offered historical analogies, quoted Islamic texts, and spoke about the need for a great reckoning. At the same time, he traveled to various parts of Europe under the pretext of academic conferences or architectural surveys. Investigations later revealed that some of these trips coincided with meetings with extremists and possible funding contacts. His ability to straddle the academic and radical worlds made him uniquely effective as a recruiter and strategist. Around 1999, the Hamburg Cell caught the attention of Al-Qaeda operatives looking for disciplined, educated recruits who could blend into Western societies. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind the 9/11 plot, identified Atta and his associates as ideal candidates. They were articulate, educated, devout, and had clean immigration records. Most importantly, they were willing to die. Atta traveled to Afghanistan under the guise of a religious pilgrimage. There, in the rugged terrain of Al-Qaeda's training camps, he met with Osama bin Laden and pledged allegiance. He was not a mere soldier, he was now a commander in the making. Training included not only physical endurance and weapons handling, but psychological conditioning. The operatives were told they were chosen by God to bring justice and to avenge the suffering of Muslims worldwide. This divine framing gave Atta and his group a sense of spiritual invincibility. When Atta returned to Hamburg, he was a changed man. He had accepted a leadership role in the 9/11 plot and was tasked with recruiting and managing the European operatives. He became more secretive, speaking in coded language and only meeting trusted individuals. His emails were cryptic, his movements calculated, and his social circle reduced to fellow operatives. Atta began intensive research on aviation, American infrastructure, and immigration loopholes. He and his team began studying flight manuals, applying for visas, and planning their travel to the United States. He knew it would be a long, complex mission requiring immense patience and discipline. Every move was documented, every step rehearsed. This period also saw a greater integration of technology into their plans. They used encrypted messages, disposable cell phones, and anonymized internet connections. They followed Al-Qaeda protocols to avoid detection. Never use the same email twice. Never stay in one city too long. Never speak of the plan in public. Atta enforced these rules with iron discipline. In one reported instance, when a cell member showed reluctance about dying in the attack, Atta berated him for cowardice and reminded him of the heavenly rewards promised to martyrs. His voice, once calm and analytical, now carried the authority of someone who believed he was fulfilling divine will. He began giving lectures to other radicalized students in Hamburg, presenting martyrdom as a logical outcome of spiritual commitment. He distributed pamphlets, handwritten notes, and Quranic interpretations tailored to reinforce the justification for violence. His influence was expanding beyond his immediate circle. In these final years before the attack, Atta's life was entirely devoted to the mission. He kept meticulous records of his finances, planned contingency routes for travel, and developed backup plans in case one or more hijackers failed to make it to the U.S. He coordinated fake identities, found sympathetic contacts for support, and set clear dates for departure and target rehearsals. He was no longer a student or even a man. In his mind, he had become a symbol, an agent of retribution for a world that he believed had abandoned justice. By 2000, everything was set. Atta and his associates had the funds, the training, and the vision. Their trip to the U.S. would be the final phase. But it was in Germany, during these transformative years, that the foundation of 9/11 was laid. Atta's story in Germany is not just one of radicalization. It is a story of a man who became the architect of destruction, quietly and meticulously building a network under the very noses of Western intelligence. It's a stark reminder of how ideology, when mixed with isolation and discipline, can create something terrifyingly efficient and lethally invisible. Journey to the United States. After completing his studies and immersing himself in radical Islamist ideology in Hamburg, Mohamed Atta and his close associates were primed for operational deployment. His move to the United States was not just a geographical relocation, it was a transition into the final and most dangerous phase of his life. In 2000, Atta and several members of the Hamburg cell, including Marwan al-Sheikhi and Ziad Jarrah, began preparations for what would become the most catastrophic terrorist attack in modern history. Mohamed Atta entered the United States on a tourist visa, claiming he was interested in attending flight school. His transformation from student to operative accelerated swiftly once he touched American soil. He enrolled at Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida, a quiet town with a small airport that would become an unlikely backdrop to history. Atta and al-Sheikhi began flight training almost immediately, raising some eyebrows due to their brusque behavior and limited English. Yet no alarms were sounded. Instructors later reported that while Atta was cold and intense, nothing overtly alarming gave away the horror he was planning. Atta was methodical in every step. He wasn't simply a student. He was a man on a mission, absorbing every technical detail he could about aircraft. His notebooks were filled with mechanical notes, sketches, and diagrams. While other students were casual or friendly, Atta remained focused and solitary, unwilling to form friendships. Even instructors noted his emotional distance and chilling precision. He studied not only flight operation but also how American airports worked, security procedures, boarding protocols, and emergency responses. He and his co-conspirators took domestic flights to observe airline routines firsthand. They practiced maneuvers in simulators and questioned instructors in a way that hinted at specific, rehearsed objectives. One instructor recalled Atta's obsession with the control panel and his fixation on maintaining control over the cockpit. As he trained to fly commercial airliners, Atta also carefully navigated the immigration system. He and his fellow operatives moved between states, rented apartments, opened bank accounts, and maintained a low profile. The operatives were meticulous, using code language, pay-as-you-go phones, and rarely drawing attention. They traveled frequently, sometimes under aliases, sometimes using their real identities, with no interference. All the while, they maintained communications with overseas handlers through anonymous internet cafes and couriers. Their financing was cleanly wired through shell organizations and Islamic charities. Atta became the ringleader, the logistical brain, and the symbolic face of the operation. He maintained close contact with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the chief architect of the 9/11 plot, and Osama bin Laden's inner circle. Using coded email accounts and couriers, he coordinated the arrival of other operatives, helped secure funding through foreign banks, and ensured that all participants were mentally and physically prepared for martyrdom. Reports suggest Atta had a deep psychological grip over the other hijackers, reinforcing their ideological commitment with religious rhetoric and ritual discipline. In early 2001, Atta traveled overseas again, visiting Spain and the UAE to finalize the attack details and possibly meet additional facilitators. It was during these months that the precise logistics of 9/11 were locked into place: target selection, hijacking techniques, timelines, and martyrdom videos. Atta's ability to blend into American society, while simultaneously plotting to bring it to its knees, was a chilling testament to his dual existence. The team had begun compartmentalizing. Each hijacker received very limited information about the overall mission, reducing the chances of exposure. Mohamed Atta, however, knew the entire plan. He recorded messages to be aired after the attacks and left behind written instructions that reflected meticulous planning, as well as a twisted sense of destiny. Atta and his men moved with eerie calm. They frequented gyms, libraries, and religious centers, often unnoticed. They purchased box cutters, which would serve as their primary weapons aboard the aircraft. They tested airport security, noting how easy it was to pass through with minimal screening. In the days before the attack, they practiced final drills, reviewed the plane's seating charts, and mentally steeled themselves for what lay ahead. In July 2001, he purchased a one-way ticket for September 11th from Portland, Maine, to Boston Logan International Airport. It was a test of the system's flexibility and a sign of supreme confidence. On the morning of September 11th, he and Abdulaziz Al-Amari boarded a small commuter flight to Boston, clearing security without issue. From there, they would board American Airlines Flight 11. The night before the attack, Atta left behind a suitcase by mistake. Inside were crucial clues: his will, a martyrdom letter, and detailed instructions for the other hijackers. It was an inadvertent but invaluable gift to investigators, offering deep insight into the minds of the terrorists. On the morning of the attack, Atta appeared calm and composed. He led his small team with military-like discipline. At 7:59 a.m. on September 11, 2001, American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston, bound for Los Angeles. Less than 30 minutes later, Atta and his accomplices stormed the cockpit, subdued the pilots, and turned the plane back toward New York City. At 8:46 a.m., the aircraft slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, killing all on board and igniting a catastrophe that would claim thousands more. Atta's voice was captured in radio transmissions to air traffic control. Calm, composed, and chillingly robotic, he relayed instructions to passengers and misled controllers. It was a brief but terrifying window into his mental state, one of absolute conviction. Authorities later reconstructed his every move in the weeks leading up to the attacks. He had visited ATMs, bought tickets in person, and stayed at motels. Global war on terror and the death of Osama bin Laden. In the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, the United States and much of the Western world were gripped by a mixture of fear, outrage, and a determination for retribution. The attacks had shattered not just buildings, but a sense of invulnerability that the American public had long taken for granted. The rubble of the World Trade Center became both a grave and a rallying cry. President George W. Bush stood amid the wreckage and declared that those responsible would be hunted down and brought to justice. Thus began the global war on terror. The first significant military action in this war was the invasion of Afghanistan in October 2001. The Taliban government, which had given sanctuary to Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda network, became the initial target. The United States, with support from NATO allies, swiftly dismantled the Taliban regime. But while cities fell and military bases were overtaken, the primary objective, capturing bin Laden, remained elusive. He had disappeared into the mountainous Tora Bora region along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, aided by loyal followers and tribal networks. The early 2000s saw a dramatic expansion of counterterrorism operations globally. Intelligence agencies were given sweeping new powers. Surveillance programs increased exponentially, both domestically and abroad. The U.S. Patriot Act allowed for greater government oversight of communications. Across Europe and the Middle East, suspected terrorists were rounded up, interrogated, and in some cases, detained without trial. CIA black sites, secret prisons, emerged as part of a controversial strategy involving extraordinary rendition and enhanced interrogation techniques. Detainees were subjected to methods that sparked global debates about human rights and the moral costs of war. While the U.S. military focused on Afghanistan, it also turned its eyes to Iraq. In 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq under the assertion that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and had ties to terrorist groups. The war would prove highly controversial and, for many, a strategic miscalculation. While Hussein's regime was toppled, the chaos that followed contributed to the rise of even more violent factions, including the eventual emergence of ISIS. In addition to military operations, a significant aspect of the war on terror was its ideological front. Efforts were made to counter extremist narratives and prevent the radicalization of vulnerable individuals. Educational programs, community outreach, and online monitoring were deployed to curtail the spread of jihadist propaganda. Governments worldwide increased funding to their intelligence agencies, and laws were passed to criminalize terrorist recruitment, financing, and travel. Meanwhile, the hunt for Osama bin Laden became a top priority for U.S. intelligence agencies. Years passed with little to no credible leads. Bin Laden managed to avoid detection through a network of couriers and remote safe houses. He released occasional video and audio messages, taunting the U.S. and praising martyrdom. These recordings were meticulously analyzed by experts, looking for clues in his surroundings, his health, or even regional accents in the background. In 2007, a breakthrough came. U.S. intelligence identified one of bin Laden's trusted couriers, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. It took several more years of surveillance and analysis, but in 2010, al-Kuwaiti led CIA operatives to a mysterious compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. The location was unusual. A large, heavily fortified structure with high walls, no internet or telephone connections, and burning trash instead of garbage disposal, suggesting a need for secrecy. Located less than a mile from Pakistan's top military academy, the compound sparked suspicion. The CIA built a model of the compound and monitored it with drones and human sources. Over several months, analysts grew increasingly confident that someone of high value, likely bin Laden himself, was living there. Still, there was no definitive visual confirmation. The risk was enormous. A failed operation could rupture U.S.-Pakistan relations, and a civilian death could spark global outrage. President Obama convened his national security team for a series of high-level meetings. Multiple options were discussed, including a drone strike. But ultimately, the president opted for a daring ground operation, a Navy SEAL raid. The mission was assigned to SEAL Team 6, officially known as the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU. On the night of May 1, 2011, May 2nd in Pakistan, two stealth helicopters departed from a U.S. base in Afghanistan and flew low into Abbottabad. As the SEALs reached the compound, one of the helicopters crash-landed due to higher-than-expected heat and air density. The team pressed on. Over the next 40 minutes, they stormed the compound, killing several individuals including bin Laden's adult son and trusted aides. Finally, on the top floor, they located Osama bin Laden. He was shot twice, once in the chest and once above the left eye. DNA testing, facial recognition, and body measurements confirmed the identity. The SEALs collected hard drives, documents, and other intelligence material. Bin Laden's body was transported back to the USS Carl Vinson and buried at sea within 24 hours in accordance with Islamic tradition, though the decision sparked further debate and conspiracy theories. The announcement came late on May 1, 2011. President Obama addressed the nation. "Justice has been done." Spontaneous celebrations erupted across the United States, especially at Ground Zero in New York City and outside the White House. The man behind 9/11 was finally dead, nearly a decade after the attacks. The death of bin Laden was a major symbolic victory, but the war on terror was far from over. Al-Qaeda, though weakened, remained operational in various regions. New branches like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, emerged. The vacuum left by bin Laden's death and the chaos in Iraq contributed to the rise of ISIS, a group even more brutal and ambitious in its aims. Internationally, the 9/11 attacks reshaped global politics. Airport security was transformed, intelligence sharing between nations improved, and Western countries redefined their defense strategies. Anti-terror laws were enacted in dozens of countries. Simultaneously, the Muslim world found itself under suspicion, leading to widespread Islamophobia and strained interfaith relations. Mosques were targeted, travel bans were instituted, and political rhetoric became increasingly polarized. Domestically, America grappled with questions of civil liberties, torture, surveillance, and the moral costs of a never-ending war. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands, both military and civilian. Veterans returned home physically wounded and psychologically scarred. Mental health crises, PTSD, and suicide rates soared among returning soldiers. Families were broken by the absence and loss, and public support for continued military engagements began to wane. Yet, for many, the death of Osama bin Laden provided a sense of closure. It was not an end, but a milestone in a larger, complex, and ongoing struggle. His demise did not dismantle the ideology he represented, but it delivered justice to a man who had brought immense suffering to the world. Bin Laden's death was a turning point, both militarily and psychologically. It marked a shift from the era of manhunts to one of ideological battles and cyber warfare. The global war on terror would continue to evolve, shifting from large-scale invasions to precision drone strikes, cyber warfare, and intelligence operations. Countries around the world developed their own counterterrorism units. Cooperation between nations became essential, with joint task forces tackling transnational networks. Mohamed Atta and his fellow hijackers became enduring symbols, not just of terrorism, but of the consequences of alienation, radicalization, and the collision of ideologies in an interconnected world. Epilogue: a world forever changed. The events of September 11, 2001, changed the trajectory of global history. From airport security to international diplomacy, from domestic policy to cultural discourse, the reverberations of that single morning continue to echo through the present day. Mohamed Atta, a once quiet student from Egypt, became a symbol of unprecedented terror, a face in the tragic transformation of civil aviation into a weapon. The world that followed 9/11 became one of suspicion and vigilance. It spurred the largest security overhaul in modern history. Surveillance programs like PRISM, vast intelligence collaborations, and biometric identification became standard practice. The way we travel, communicate, and even interact across cultures was irreversibly shaped. But amid the fear, another global transformation emerged: resilience. Communities across the world came together, transcending faith and borders, to counter extremism not only with force, but with education, compassion, and dialogue. Former radicals spoke out. Religious leaders condemned violence. A new generation grew up not only learning about terrorism but actively choosing to fight its ideologies with peaceful resistance. The war on terror exposed many ethical contradictions and geopolitical complexities. From Guantanamo Bay to drone strikes in Yemen, the fine line between security and liberty was often blurred. Yet, these very tensions sparked fierce public debate and civil activism. In many democratic societies, transparency and accountability became more than ideals, they became demands. Mohamed Atta's legacy is not just destruction, it is also the catalyst for transformation. His life, and the lives of those he helped extinguish, became part of a global story that continues to evolve. The world became more hardened, but also more aware, more cautious, but also more connected in its rejection of extremism. In the end, history will not only remember the terror, it will remember the resilience. It will remember the unity forged in crisis. And it will remember that peace, though fragile, is a choice made every day in the aftermath of darkness. This has been a production by Peaceful Stories. If you found this documentary insightful, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and stay peaceful.
To look at least three sides of tower number one, and that is the only building.
It's exploding right now, Tommy. We're seeing another
apparently
plane.
That was another plane.
There's another one. I'm taking a look.
Oh my God!
my God! Oh my God! Another plane just went in. Another tower.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
What's this other jet doing? What's this other jet doing? Holy fuck!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Jesus fucking Christ! Chris, are you...
Don't touch it.
Oh my God!
There are people killed there, people trapped.
Whatever fell down also is... You ever been down there
debris,
the debris could
It's
kill?
an international tourist place, lots of people. There's not a plane coming down.
Holy
You see?
shit, what the fuck is wrong with that?
Boom!
Oh man, what the fuck's going on?
Wow!
Oh shit.
Wow! Do you see this aircraft? I've got it all.
Yo, what the fuck? Yo, that's terrorist shit, bro.
That is it. This is terrorist.
Holy shit!
How the fuck the plane's doing? Holy shit. You got that?
I got that.
Holy shit, I'm sitting here walking, you know.
Holy shit!
That was the other building?
That was the other fucking building!
Holy shit! Holy shit! Oh my God!
No doubt a lot of activity on the ground right now. Wow. That apparently does look like it is in the other building at this point.
Holy shit! Holy shit! God! Holy shit!
tell him I'm not coming with it.
Regardless, it's gonna be so dangerous at that base. Obviously. Wait. Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
What?
Oh my god! It's terrorist activity! What do we do?
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Holy shit, Martin. That's the other building. That's terrorists.
Other building?
That's terrorists, bro. That's fucking terrorists.
Holy shit!
Whoa, shit.
Oh my god.
What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
We're fucking bombing it. Holy fuck.
Fight it with helicopters.
Oh my god! Oh my
Another plane just hit.
What?
Another plane just hit.
Cut on the whole right side. That must be a wing that sheared that off.
Yeah, you could see it. You can see from the cut. It just tipped it up.
So I went inside and I turned on a TV and I saw what millions of Americans saw.
Jim Friedel in Hoboken said it appeared to bank sharply and smash directly, perhaps purposefully, into, oh my goodness,
oh God,
there's another one. Oh my goodness, there's another one.
This seems to be on purpose.
Oh my goodness,
another
now you...
plane?
At this point, the Associated Press with a story that says there is no report of any casualties, without jumping to too many conclusions, looking at the extent of this damage and knowing how well populated that building is. At that, now there's another explosion down to the left side on the second World Trade Center tower. You see that that huge ball of fire that just went up there. I know it's a
And as you noted, Jim, this has been a target before. Back on February 26, 93, a terrorist act at the World Trade Center killed 6 and injured more than 1,000 others. Do you know whether or not the FBI had received any warning?
Nearly smack in the middle of Tower 2. Now this is amateur video that you're looking at. It seems as though this is actually not even on the ground. This person may have been elevated somewhat. There's yet another angle. The plane coming out the other side of Tower 2. And this one, of course, hitting much lower than the first attack on Tower 1. And the third piece of video that we have
Watch closely at the right of your screen as a second jetliner heads for what even to the untrained eye looks like a surgical strike into the South Tower. Against a backdrop of gentle blue skies, a terrorist arrow pierces the heart of a city and a nation.